Welcome to the second episode of Dietitians Dialogue. My name's Jamie Portnoy, your host. Today, we have a very special guest, Deborah Pankey, a food editor and food critic from the Daily Herald. Hi, Deborah.
Hi, Jamie.
Thank you very much for being here today. We're very excited to have you.
Well, thanks for having me out.
So, Deborah, tell us a little bit about you.
Started working for the Daily Herald as a general assignment reporter, covering everything from school board meetings to water commissions and the like, and then started getting a bit of an interest in food writing and did a couple small stories for our food section, and then a year later when they needed a food editor, I was there and got lucky, kind of fell into this position.
Sure.
And it almost feels like it's come full circle for me, because my father was a food technologist, developing new products for places like Quaker Oats and Del Monte Foods and Frito-Lay. And my grandfather was a master baker, and my uncles, and so many of my family have been involved in the food business. It just kind of seemed like it was a natural fit for me to settle right into food writing.
Absolutely. So you fell into the right place at the right time.
I did.
So a food editor, what exactly is a food editor?
Well, I am responsible for filling the weekly food section, and we are a general interest newspaper. So I have everything from trend stories about if people are cooking with more sausages or if they're cooking with cauliflower. And then I also have columns that range from baking tips to lean cooking tips to, I have a wine writer who recommends, what we should be drinking this season, or we'll go into specifics about a certain region. And then kind of the hallmarks of our food section is a feature called Cook of the Week. And that's where we have home cooks from all over the suburbs. They get nominated, their daughter or husband or significant other might say, hey, my wife or my girlfriend or my husband is a really good cook. And so we write a feature about that person, just, your average general person at home who loves to cook, and they share some recipes with us, kind of tell us their story about how they got passionate into cooking, share some recipes with us. We also give them an opportunity to shoot a cooking video.
Wow.
And some people think that's kind of fun, their little 5 minutes of fame on the internet.
Absolutely. So there is a whole lot that entails being a food writer.
Yes.
Or a food editor, I should say.
Yes. I do both. I write a weekly column that includes, little food news and tips. If there might be a cookbook author coming to town, you'll read about it in my section. If there's a chef, we just recently featured the chef at Mariano's. Mariano's are popping up all over. And so the chef at Mariano's took some time with me, gave me a tour of one of the stores, and then talked to me about how he got into being a chef, and shared a couple recipes with our readers too.
So recipes, we keep talking about recipes. What seems to be the biggest response from your viewers of the recipes that you seem to write about?
Well, lately, late last summer, my baking columnist, Annie Overbo, decided to do a couple gluten-free columns. And, a lot of people now are talking about gluten-free or trying to eat gluten-free. So she ran a gluten-free chocolate chip cookie recipe. And then a couple weeks later, she was at a baking event and demonstrated a gluten-free birthday cake. And I've gotten so many people calling up saying, gosh, I'm trying to find that recipe. My niece is coming over and she can't eat gluten, and I want to try these recipes. So I tell people the recipes are online on our Daily Herald website at dailyherald.com. If you go to the food tab, you can click under recent recipes. You can search by recipe. If you know the name of the recipe, you could type in gluten-free chocolate chip cookie recipe in the main box, and it should come up to tell you how you can find the recipe. And then we've also had many requests for vegetarian and vegan recipes. We just ran like 2 vegan recipes in January, and I got an email back from a reader saying, "Thank you so much, these are wonderful," and but that's not to say that, we run Italian recipes. We've got a very beloved lasagna that people call and want to get a copy of.
So there's a wide variety of
Yes.
all different types of recipes that
Yes.
you have. So you would say probably the percentage of desserts to meals?
First of all, I'm a big believer in dessert.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. And but that said, I tend to tailor recipes and pick recipes to run in the paper for families, for dinner. Things that, mom or dad can come home from work and put on the table or start in the morning in the crock pot. I've also just, I've fallen in love with my crock pot again this season. And have made soups and chilies and this wonderful chicken curry, which came from a Betty Crocker's slim crock pot cookbook. It's called something like that. So I tend to focus on recipes that are very approachable for home cooks, that you're not going to get a recipe, clip a recipe from my paper and have to go to 4 different stores looking for the ingredients. You don't have to go find kefir lime leaves for, my recipe.
So things that are going to be easier for people and more accessible for people to use.
But I also, not to say that I don't think our recipes will challenge you, because I think, you should try recipes that you haven't tried before, and it's good for you. And I think once you build up that confidence, if you follow a recipe that you like 3 times and cook it the same time every time, then that 4th time you're ready to make it, you might think, you know what, maybe I could try this with turkey sausage, or darn it, I have no more basil today. Can I try it with oregano?
Sure.
So I hope that my section helps build confidence in cooks.
Well, I'm sure it does. And speaking actually about nutrition, does your columns have the nutritional value to each recipe?
Most of them do. Our baking columns, I have a gentleman, Don Maurer, who writes a column called Lean and Loving It, and his focus for a long time was always on the low fat. I have another Eat Right, Live Well column where we do give, how much fat, how much sodium. Sometimes I think people are shocked when they see a recipe and it looks pretty much healthy all the way through, and then you get down and like the sodium is like 1,000. Well, then you need to look at that recipe and try to figure out maybe where is that sodium coming from? Is it from the canned tomatoes? So when you make it for yourself, buy the low sodium tomatoes, or if it's got chicken broth, buy the low sodium chicken broth. So I think those I hope that people don't see those nutrition analysis and just toss the paper aside altogether. I hope that through the other stories and columns that we've run in the paper, we've given readers the tools to take those recipes and know how to make them work for their families.
Great point. Or even using their own tools and say, for example, having those low sodium options, or even using, for example, the tomatoes and using real tomatoes instead of canned tomatoes.
Right.
So that's a great point that you brought up. So being a food editor, what are some of the restaurants that you think as a personal choice that you would say would be your favorite?
Right now, I'm really big on E&O in Mount Prospect. That the restaurant made our end of the year favorite list, and I was there in December with a girlfriend, just sitting at the bar, a nice cocktail, sushi, and this kale Brussels sprout salad that, it's like one of the best things ever I've put in my mouth. I like Retro Bistro in Mount Prospect. I tend to like the French places. I like to have a sit down, a nice sit down meal. But at the same time, I love to just go for a good burger at Branson Palatine. A good burger with the boys after swim practice.
So Deb, what have you learned by being a food editor?
I think I've learned myself to be a more confident cook and to be a more patient cook. Sometimes read a recipe twice, they always say to do that. Really always do that, because I find myself when I don't and I rush through things, I realize I forget things. So I've become more confident though in tweaking a recipe to make it suit my family's diet. So.
And now, what do you see yourself doing in 10 years, and what are your goals?
Well, my immediate goal, I just want our readers to pick up the Wednesday food section and find recipes that they can cut out and that they can make and that they can feed their family. There's no better thing than bringing people together over a meal, whether it's just inviting neighbors over for a pot of soup or, people over for a game. Watch the Olympics with a pot of chili or grilling for baseball. So I want people to get those recipes from me. I think I share a lot of approachable recipes. And then the newspaper business is changing so rapidly.
Sure.
So I'd really like to build our online recipe archive. We have so many recipes online available, recipes that have run in the paper for the past several years. And I would like to build on that archive so people can use the Daily Herald as a resource for finding the recipes and making dinner and bringing people together.
Well, Deb, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. You have given us so much information, and we would love for you to come back and give us updates in the food world.
Okay, I'd be delighted to, Jamie.
Remember, if you embrace nutrition, nutrition will embrace you. This is your show. We want to hear from you. So follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, or email us. Because again, we want to hear what you have to say. Thank you, and we'll see you next show.